Let the record show. Senior diplomat VX Orr cleared his throat, adjusting his ceremonial robes before the Council's recording crystals. I, Voss, Power of the Century Diplomatic Corps, am making this testimony of my own free will and with full awareness that it may be my last official act. The council chambers felt different now. The soaring crystal spires that had once sparkled with hope and unity now cast long, accusatory shadows across the empty seats. Vaxos ran his hand across the smooth, obsidian surface of the speaking podium, remembering how many times he'd watched humans stand here, smiling politely through every interruption and dismissal. We called them patient, he continued, his secondary breathing passages wheezing with what might have been a laugh or a sob. No, that's not entirely accurate. We called them pets, amusing little creatures who had somehow stumbled their way into faster-than-light travel. When they smiled and nodded at our condescension, we mistook their restraint for submission. When they quietly accepted our amendments to their trade agreements, we thought them simple. When they calmly protested our violations of their sovereignty, we saw only weakness. A distant explosion rattled the chamber windows. Vaxos didn't flinch. The defense systems would hold for now. I remember Ambassador Rodriguez standing right here. He gestured to the podium's worn center. 6 months ago, warning us about pushing too far. She used such fascinating human expressions. The straw that breaks the camel's back. The patience of saints. We laughed. Quietly, of course. We were much too sophisticated to laugh openly at our pets. Another explosion, closer this time. The recording crystals flickered but held steady. The humans had a saying about assumption being the mother of all mistakes. Funny, they tried to warn us about that too. But we assumed their patience was infinite. We assumed their technological advancement matched their diplomatic demeanor. We assumed their military capabilities were as limited as they appeared. Voss straightened his spine, all 4 eyes focusing directly on the central recording crystal. To any species who reviews this testimony in the future, learn from our catastrophic error. The humans weren't patient because they were weak. They were patient because they were strong enough to afford patience. They smiled through our insults because they knew. They knew exactly what they were capable of. While we congratulated ourselves on our superiority, they watched and waited and built. The chamber's emergency lights flashed red, casting an almost theatrical glow across Voss's scaled features. When human children died aboard the Star Dreamer, that legendary patience finally shattered. And now we understand. We understand that what we mistook for the collar of a pet was actually a leash, and we were the ones being held back from a very, very steep fall. A proximity alarm began to wail. Vaxos closed his secondary eyes in resignation, leaving his primary pair fixed on the recording crystal. The following is a complete account of how the Galactic Council learned that patience, true patience, is not a sign of weakness, but a luxury of the powerful. And we were never as powerful as we thought. The decline in relations, Voss continued, can be traced to 3 specific incidents. Looking back now, each one feels like watching someone build their own funeral pyre, thinking it was a pleasure cruise. He pulled up the first holo record, showing the council chambers. During the Mining Rights Conference, the Proxima Centauri incident, Council President Xena Toll declared human mining claims administratively invalid due to what she called clerical oversights. 4 colonies, 10,000 human miners, all their equipment stripped away with a single thumbprint. The holo showed Ambassador Kira Rodriguez at the podium, her dark hair streaked with silver, hands clasped calmly behind her back. Honourable Council, her voice rang clear and steady. These colonies have operated legally for 15 years. Our documentation is complete. This appears to be a unilateral decision made without proper... The forms, Xena had interrupted. mandibles clicking in what Vaxos now recognized as poorly disguised greed, were filed in human standard dates rather than galactic standard. A tragic oversight. The Mox-Tarin Mining Consortium has already been granted replacement rights. Rodriguez had simply nodded, typed something into her datapad, and said, "The Human Federation notes this decision. We trust the Council maintains records of all such administrative adjustments." The second incident, Vaxos shifted uncomfortably, came 3 months later. The Council's Transportation Authority reclassified 6 major trade routes through human space as highly restricted military corridors. No notice, no discussion. 50 years of established trade lanes gone. The hollow shifted to show the Trade Commissioner BXN smugly informing the human delegation that their merchant vessels would need to file new flight plans through Mox-Tarin space at 17 times the previous transport costs. Rodriguez, again somehow maintaining that same composed smile, responded, "The Human Federation notes this decision as well, though we wonder if the Council has considered the full implications of..." "The human delegate will refrain from questioning Council security decisions," BXN had snapped. "This matter is closed." But the third incident, Vaxos's voice dropped to nearly a whisper. That was when we should have seen it, really seen it. The Terraform Approval Board denied expansion rights to 3 human colonies suffering from overpopulation. Meanwhile, they fast-tracked approval for Mox-Tarin luxury resorts on 12 worlds bordering human space. The hollow showed Rodriguez yet again, but this time, Vaxos had finally noticed something in her eyes, something that should have terrified them all. "The Human Federation," she said, that same diplomatic smile fixed in place, "notes this decision as well, and we want to ensure the Council's records are absolutely clear on the sequence of events and decisions leading to this point. The human delegate will not make threats." Threats? Council President Zena Toll had sneered. Rodriguez's laugh had been like crystal chimes, pleasant and dangerous all at once. "I'm simply doing my job, ensuring accurate record-keeping. After all, we wouldn't want any clerical oversights when the time comes to review these decisions." Vaxos paused, the hollow zooming in on Rodriguez's face. "Look at her eyes. Really look. That's not submission in those eyes. That's not patience. That's a predator counting heartbeats until the strike." He waved the hollow away, his scales rippling with embarrassment. "But we didn't see it. The Mox-Tarin representatives actually laughed, called her the well-trained human, right to her face, and she just smiled that smile and kept taking notes. We thought we were watching a species too weak to stand up for itself," Vaxos admitted. "Instead, we were watching a species giving us every possible chance to step back from the edge." Ambassador Rodriguez wasn't taking notes for some useless human archive. She was documenting, building a case, creating what humans call a paper trail of our own stupidity. Another explosion rocked the chambers, closer now. 3 incidents, 3 chances to recognize what we were really dealing with. But we were too busy congratulating ourselves on our clever manipulation of the simple humans, too busy patting ourselves on the back while they smiled and took notes. Vaxos touched the podium again, right where Rodriguez had always placed her right hand. "And the truly remarkable thing," he continued, "they gave us even more chances after this. So many chances to pull back, to reconsider. The humans have a saying about having the patience of a saint. We should have asked ourselves, what kind of strength does it take to maintain that sort of patience? And what happens when it finally runs out?" "The Star Dreamer," Vaxos's voice cracked on the name. "That's what broke it. That's what finally shattered the glass." His hand shook as he pulled up the last peaceful moment the galaxy would ever know. The research vessel. Star Dreamer, hanging in space like a silver needle against black velvet. The Mox-Tarin patrol ships approaching. The transmission logs. Mox-Tarin patrol. This is Star Dreamer. "We're a civilian research vessel studying quantum fields." The human captain's voice was professional and calm. "You are in restricted space. Power down and prepare for inspection." "There must be a mistake. We're well within the approved research corridor. We have children aboard conducting their first deep space." The weapons fire cut off the transmission. Vaxos let the silence hang. 27 humans aboard, 8 of them children, part of what they call their Young Explorers program, all lost. And we sat in these chambers and called it an unfortunate incident arising from navigational error. The holo shifted to Commander Blake Chen's entrance to the council chamber. Not through the doors, no, through the wall. The explosion had caught everyone by surprise, except perhaps Ambassador Rodriguez, who hadn't even flinched. "You're out of order," Council President Zenitol had shrieked. "Guards." Chen had walked straight to the podium, his dress uniform immaculate despite the debris. The guards hadn't dared approach. Something in his eyes, perhaps, or the way he moved, like a caged storm given human form. "Play the footage," he said quietly. "No preamble, no diplomatic niceties." "You will leave this chamber immediately," Zena began. "Play the footage." And they had. Because that tone, that moment, it stripped away millions of years of civilization and spoke to something older, something that remembered what it meant to be prey. The security feed from the Star Dreamer's recreation deck filled the chamber. Children floating in zero gravity, laughing as they conducted their first space experiments, making notes about crystal formation in microgravity, trading jokes about space food. Young voices singing what they called an old space song about a Major Tom. Then the first impact, the lights failing, the terror. These children, Chen's voice could have frozen suns, were writing thank you notes to the Council for allowing their research trip. They were thanking you while your patrol ships were powering up weapons. He pulled out a paper note, an actual handwritten one. "This is from Amy Chen, my daughter, aged 12. Her last words, written as your ships approached, were, 'Thank you for letting us see the stars.'" The silence in the chamber had weight, mass, gravity. "You called this an unfortunate incident," Chen continued, each word falling like an asteroid impact. "Said they shouldn't have been there. Said the deaths were regrettable, but ultimately their own fault for being in restricted space." He placed Amy's note on the podium with devastating gentleness. "Let me be clear, crystal clear. This note, these children, they were the last of humanity's patience, the final line. You spent years treating our diplomacy as weakness, our restraint as fear, our patience as submission. That ends today." The holo showed Rodriguez standing, walking to Chen's side, her eternal diplomatic smile, finally, gone. "The Human Federation doesn't just note this incident," she said, and the room had actually flinched at her tone. "The Human Federation remembers." The recording of that session went viral across the galaxy. 100 species watched humanity's patience finally run dry. 100 species realized all at once that they'd never actually seen humanity angry before. "We should have remembered Earth's oceans," Vaxos muttered to the recording crystal. "They're deepest predators. They're the ones that never need to hurry, never need to snap at every target, never need to prove themselves. They can afford patience because nothing hunts them, nothing threatens them, nothing challenges them." He checked the emergency displays. The human fleet was closer now. "We thought we were watching sheep learn to walk among wolves. Instead, we were watching dragons pretend to be sheep, right up until we threatened their young." When the human ships began moving, Vaxos continued, watching another explosion bloom against the orbital shields. The Council had actually laughed, called it a tantrum. "Posturing," Councillor Nazul said, and I quote, Let them burn fuel showing us their outdated ships. Perhaps it will help them work through their emotional outburst. The holofeed showed the initial report. 300 human vessels moving in perfect formation. Old ships, familiar designs, nothing that worried the Council's military advisors. Then Admiral Mir Patel's transmission had hit every frequency, every channel, every communication device in Council space. Her face, bronze skin set off by her stark white uniform, filled every screen in the Council chamber. This is Fleet Admiral Mir Patel of the Human Federation Navy. For 50 years we've maintained what we call the paperclip protocol, named after an old Earth saying, "Show your enemies a paperclip. Keep the nuclear weapons at home." She paused, letting that sink in. Every ship you've seen until today, deliberately outdated. Every weapon we've shown, intentionally basic. Every technology we've shared, carefully selected to seem primitive. The Council chamber had erupted in disbelief, but Patel's voice cut through the chaos like a plasma torch through butter. The Star Dreamer carried children, our children. They died writing thank you notes to their killers. We're done playing pretend now. That's when the outdated human ships had changed. Vaxos still struggled to describe it properly. They'd seemed to shiver like heat waves over desert sand, and suddenly they were different vessels entirely, larger, sleeker, bristling with weapons and technologies that weren't supposed to exist. "The quantum shell disruption," Vaxos whispered to the recording crystal. "That's what broke Nastul, watching 300 supposedly primitive ships shed their camouflage, like snakes shedding skin. But it wasn't just the ships. It was what they did next." The holo showed the Moxian Defense Fleet, pride of the Council forces moving to intercept 10,000 ships against 300. The Council chamber had relaxed, convinced of victory through numbers alone. Admiral Patel's voice had come again. "This demonstration will now show 3 new technologies. Pay attention, there won't be a second showing." The first human ship fired something. Not plasma, not laser, not any weapon type the Council recognized. Space itself seemed to hiccup. 20 Mox-Tian ships simply stopped existing, their atoms gently encouraged to take a brief vacation from reality. Localized space-time incursion weapons, Vaxos recited from memory. They'd had them for decades, never showed them, never even hinted.